What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Go Talk with Marcus, powered by Podex, fueled by Go Fuel. Before we jump in, just want to say a big thank you to everyone that watched the Browns episode. Given the magnitude, I greatly appreciate it. And if you haven't watched the Browns episode, and you are going to watch or listen to the Browns episode, do know that the first about 36 minutes of the show is very heavy because of the things going on with Deshaun Watson. And if that is not something that you can handle or something that would potentially trigger you, then you can start the show at 36 minutes and 40 seconds. And Peyton and I, who was on that show, we talk about Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, and Amari Cooper, and a lot of other things that do with the Browns outside of Deshaun Watson. With that being said, Peyton's back on the show to talk about the Browns' division rival, Baltimore Ravens. What's up, man? How you doing?
Doing pretty good, bro. Ready to talk about our arch nemesis here.
I think this is going to be a good episode. Steezy, if you're listening, turn it off because you're not going to like the things I have to say because I don't think Lamar Jackson's a top 10 quarterback, and I'll down that hill. But we'll get into that later in the show. Let's start, though, by talking about the draft for the Ravens. I think really the big one is Kyle Hamilton at safety. I believe they picked him. Not I believe. They picked him at 14. That's why this is the 14th episode. So they picked him at 14. This has been a defense that was really good, but then obviously because of last season, a lot of injuries, they kind of took a step back. A lot of guys are going to come back healthy. How do you think Kyle Hamilton fits into Baltimore's defense in his rookie season?
Well, I mean, we all know Baltimore is going to do – they love to blitz. They love to blitz. Yeah. And the great thing about Kyle Hamilton is not only is he used to playing as a free safety and deep in coverage, and he can cover tons of field. I know his 40 time at the combine was a little bit slow, but let's be honest. On film, when we watch him play, he covers ground – like crazy, especially in pass coverage. So he's a guy that you could line up in the slot. He's a guy that you could line up deep. He's a guy that you could line up even in some packages as a linebacker almost. He's a guy that you could line up as a box safety. You could blitz him. You could do a lot of different things. And we all know that guys like that flourish with the Ravens. The Ravens run a base of, I believe, a 3-4, which is 3 defensive linemen in the box. So we all know they can't rush 3. You can't rush 3 every single time. So normally they'll bring a linebacker in as an extra edge rusher, or in this case, I believe Kyle Hamilton will be doing a lot of that as well as a box safety for the Ravens, putting pressure on the quarterback and even making plays covering tight ends and wide receivers in the slot.
I mean, we look at Micah Parsons, and I know they play different positions, but we look at Micah Parsons, and one of the reasons why we loved Micah Parsons last season was because of his versatility, right? You saw Dan Quinn, defense coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. You see Micah Parsons sometimes lined up inside, outside the line. He's at the outside linebacker position. Really, Micah Parsons lined up at every position last season except for cornerback and safety. Like, he was really just versatile. Now, I know Kyle Hamilton's obviously built a little bit different, and he's not as big of a guy, so you're not going to see him lined up, up on the line. I mean, not as a linebacker, but you can see him as the primary corner on the primary receiver. You could see him as a slot corner. You could see him as this free or strong safety because that's just how versatile he is, and he's very, 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 very good at what he does. If I had to pick someone not named Sauce Gardner or Aiden Hutchinson to be Defensive Rookie of the Year, my pick would be Kyle Hamilton. I think I didn't mention this in the Commanders episode. I don't think I did. I mentioned it here. I think this is a really big loss for the Commanders because I was expecting the Commanders to kind of get a little bit aggressive and trade up for Kyle Hamilton because they have a really solid front 7, and their back 4 is okay, but it could be so much better. And it's always nice to have that Swiss Army knife kind of guy, right? Whether it's offensively, whether it's defensively, just like having that guy that you can kind of put anywhere and kind of confuse the opposing team is what's best. Kyle Hamilton fits. He's young, and because he can do so many different things, like I said, and like you said, it doesn't matter where he goes. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you can have Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Peters and all these other great guys on the field at the same time and move them around, and it makes things that much more difficult for the offensive coordinator. And he's going to flourish. Like, this is a really good system. This is a team that's had a really good defense the past couple of seasons when healthy. I expect that to continue, and Kyle Hamilton's only going to add on to that for sure.
Yeah, and the Ravens know how to use players like that. If he got drafted to a terrible team such as like Jacksonville or Detroit, I would say I would be kind of worried. I'd be concerned for Kyle Hamilton. It's kind of like Isaiah Simmons. Isaiah Simmons came out and he was like, everyone was like, oh my gosh, he could play every position and this and that. He gets drafted to the Cardinals. Let's be honest. Defensively and the coaching staff there, we don't know if they can actually develop players. And I don't think that they know how to use an Isaiah Simmons on a defense like that. So Kyle Hamilton, kind of slipped a little bit. I think he was the 14th overall pick. He was definitely at one point a projected top 10, even some saying top 5 pick. And he definitely slipped a lot, but I think it worked out to his benefit. He's on a team that will actually know how to use him and his versatility and know how to maximize his potential as well.
I mean, 100%. I mean, we talked a lot about Sauce Gardner, how great of that pick was, and how he won't be tested because of his schedule. Kyle Hamilton, same thing. He's going to have 2 games against the Bengals, who've got T. Higgins and those boys out there, and Jamar Chase. Obviously, he's going to have 2 games against Amari Cooper. He's going to have, as a safety, rather, but still nonetheless. He's going to have 2 games against the Steelers wide receiver core, who's able to sneeze at, right? Like, he's going to get tested, but I think he's going to be fitting for it. Now, while Baltimore gained a valuable asset in Kyle Hamilton defensively, they may have lost another valuable asset offensively with Hollywood Brown. What was your reaction to the Hollywood Brown trade on draft night? Because I think of all the things that went down on draft night, that one was probably the most confusing to me.
Yeah, I mean, my reaction was just as anyone else's, and that was, okay, well, this happened, and now who the hell is Lamar Jackson going to throw to? Every offense needs the guy that can burn the defense, can burn that second unit of the defense and get open down the field. Mark Andrews is great as a receiver out of the tight end position. Don't get me wrong. Obviously putting up 1,300 yards last year and whatnot. But Marquise Brown was their guy that when Lamar needed to stretch the field, when Lamar needed to take that deep shot, or the deep shot was just available, they could do so. Without Marquise Brown, I don't know how they're going to do that. I don't know. I mean, seriously, outside of Rashad Bateman, I don't know. I couldn't name another receiver on their team. Maybe Devin Duvernay. I don't even know if he's still there, to be honest with you.
They've got Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, James Proche II, Tylan Wallace, Jalen Moore, Benjamin Victor. It's not looking good.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, I don't know who those guys are. They need to. I think they just need to sign a veteran free agent. I don't know who's available as a wide receiver. Sign a guy like, remember Ted Ginn Jr.?
Yes.
Ted Ginn Jr. was a serviceable wide receiver, and he was nothing other than a run straight down the freaking field. If you get open downfield, we're gonna hit you on a huge pass. And normally that's how it worked. That was what he was used in Carolina, and even when he went to New Orleans from time to time, a guy like Deshaun Jackson, stuff like that. They need to go get someone, a veteran who can just make big plays when needed, because Rashad Bateman has potential, but even coming out of college, the big play, the explosive play was never his thing. He's a possession guy. He's a lot like Allen Robinson. You could look for him in the red zone. He has great hands. He's reliable, big body, but he's not going to take the top off of a defense such as a Marquise Brown would. So I think they definitely need to go find someone to try to add that aspect back to the offense, because I know that they like to run the ball and that's their system. And schematically, they don't really need a lot of great wide receivers and there's no need to pay them, but you do just need someone to go to other than Mark Andrews, to be honest.
One of the things that made this run only really style of offense work is that you still had someone to throw the ball to that kept the defense honest. Mm-hmm. That doesn't exist anymore. Like, you've got Lamar Jackson, you have Mark Andrews, who I believe is a top 5 tight end in the NFL. Outside of that, this offense is bereft of talent. I mean, you look at J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, and that's a nice, 1-2 punch in the backfield. And obviously, you have Mike Davis and Justice Hill as the 3 and the 4. But like, J.K. Dobbins has an injury history, as does Gus Edwards, and Lamar Jackson has to be able to throw the ball to someone. I think Rashad Bateman is going to have a good season because he's a good player. He's not going to be a bad wide receiver. But when we're talking about keeping the defense honest and we're talking about keeping defense on their toes, we're going to be looking at a lot of 5 to 12 yard passes, and we're going to be looking at a lot of running and a lot of RPOs. RPOs work a lot in Baltimore, A, because of Lamar Jackson, but B, because there was always a guy that could blow the top of the defense off in Marquise Brown, and he's not there anymore. Can you trust Rashad Bateman to be that guy to go and get those deep balls? I'm not saying you can't, but I don't think 100% at this point that you can say definitively that you can. And that's the issue, is this wide receiver room is bereft of talent. Do you go out there and you get a Julio Jones? Maybe. Do you get an Odell Beckham Jr., who apparently played the entire second half of last season without ACL? Maybe. Like, those are really the only 2 options left on the wide receiver market right now. And while I do think that Odell Beckham Jr. is the better option, That's a lot of money that the Ravens don't have off the top of my head. And while you could go get a Julio Jones, and he can be that big play guy for you. He did miss a majority of last season due to hamstring injuries. And we all know hamstring injuries, even though if you get over them, they can still come back on you and sneak up on you at the drop of a hat. And Julio is getting older, right? Julio is not the same. While he has a big body, I don't know if Julio was still the deep threat that he once was. And that's also an issue. So those are really your two options. This is clearly a situation where they're really trusting in their defense, obviously, as far as just beefing up that defense, but then also on the back end as well, really trusting Lamar Jackson and his mobility and hoping that, look, maybe the opposing defenses don't figure him out. But one of the reasons, again, why they weren't figuring him out was because there were other weapons offensively. You still had Marquise Brown, you had Mark Andrews. Now, I would expect this team to be running a lot more heavily than any seasons past because they don't have any. It's like, now you're putting Lamar Jackson in bigger jeopardy because he's going to be scrambling a lot more because he's not going to have those deep. It's going to be really interesting what this offense looks like. I don't know if this was the best decision for the Ravens to make. This might have been perfect for Hollywood Brown because now he's back with his college quarterback and Kyler Murray. But if you're Baltimore, this is really a head scratcher, and they haven't seemed to have done anything or shown any indication to make one believe, whether you're a fan of the Ravens or a casual fan, to make you think that they are in pursuit of Julio Jones and or Odell Beckham Jr. And that's an issue. Like who is Lamar Jackson going to throw the ball to other than Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman?
No one. I mean, like seriously, like they don't have anyone is the problem. And it's insane to think this. And you said it. The Ravens might run the ball more this year. How? They already run the ball more than anyone in the entire NFL. Yep. If not, they're always up there. So, like you said, removing Marquise Brown had the defenses staying honest. Without a Marquise Brown, what is there? And not only that, but you also lose the ability of a guy to create plays after the catch as well. Because, not every play that not every pass that Lamar throws is going to be a 20, 30-yard pass. A lot of times with especially in an offense like this where you're trying to get the underneath routes open through RPOs and play actions and whatnot, you're not really always looking for the deep ball. So you need a guy who can get open in open space, such as kind of like a Deebo Samuel. They're kind of shifty, can kind of run with the ball. Marquise Brown was very good at that as well.
Yeah.
That's not there. That's not there anymore. And it's tough because now you're losing an aspect of this offense that you need to get back because you can be a master of one, but you do need a little bit of balance. Mm-hmm. You can't just run. You can't just throw. That's why the Bills struggled the past few years. Why? They can't run. At least not consistently they can't run. So you need to have a guy that you could rely on to make plays in open space, to get open across the middle of the field, to get open down the field on deeper routes, and they don't have that without Marquise Brown.
I mean, you talk about balance. We talk about Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins being in that backfield. Are you confident in Baltimore's backfield at all? Like, if you had to put on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you in Baltimore's backfield this year?
I'm pretty confident. I get the injury history and whatnot between J.K. and Gus, but the Ravens, for whatever reason, they will always have a good backfield. It doesn't really matter who they put together. I mean, even last year, they were running a backfield with Devontae Freeman and I forgot the other guy's name, but he was playing great too. I remember he was like a fantasy gem for guys that got him on their leagues last year. So they always find a way to make these running backs useful, and they have their role and they're effective as well. Part of that is because of the scheme that they play, but just historically, the Ravens over the past 10, 15 years have always had a decent running game at the absolute worst.
That's fair. I mean, I'm not gonna beat the dead horse. I do think though that what this means is that, and I was a little bit shocked. What this means though is that I because of the injury history, I do think the Ravens will be in the running back market a lot sooner than they like to be. Running backs notoriously have a much shorter shelf life, probably the shortest shelf life of any position in the NFL. These guys being injured, even though when they're healthy, they are together, I would say, one of the better duos in the league. the key would be when they're healthy. It's not often that both of them are healthy, at least at the same time. When healthy, though, this works, and it takes pressure off of Lamar. One of the reasons why Lamar was injured a couple times last season was because he was doing a lot more running because the backfield wasn't healthy. Injuries are part of the game. That's just kind of what happens. But I do think, though, it's not that this is a bad duo. It's just the injury thing is going to become, I think, even more pertinent this season because they're going to be running the ball a lot more. Not just with Lamar, but with JK and also with Gus. Like this is going to clearly be a run-heavy football team. And so we're going to see the workload for both of these guys go up a lot this season because they don't have anyone to throw the ball to. That could spell trouble down the line as far as efficiency and effectiveness and longevity through the course of the 17-game season, and then potentially should the Ravens make the playoffs. Now, speaking of playoffs, Lamar Jackson in 4 games in the playoffs is 1-3. I believe he has 4 touchdowns and 5 interceptions in those 4 games. Got heat the other day for saying that Lamar Jackson's the 11th best quarterback, 11th/12th best quarterback in the NFL. And I'll dive into that a little bit in a second. Is it fair to hold Lamar Jackson's playoff record against him?
It's definitely fair. And I don't think that it's outrageous to say Lamar Jackson is 11th or 12th. I have him at 10th. Just because I think the fact that Lamar Jackson is so unique, and I replied to your tweet saying you can't deny that he's the most unique player in the entire NFL.
100%.
And because of that, it's so hard to game plan against him because yes, they do a lot of designed runs, but what we don't hear about is that a lot of that is just Lamar so instinctual on the field. He's so fluid in terms of how he plays the game. Yeah. And are we sure that this brand of football can win in the playoffs yet? No, we're not sure yet. And that's why you have to hold that against him just a little bit because, yeah, you had that one win against the Titans, but you also have been disappointing outside of that. So you need to hold that against him, but I don't think it's the be-all, end-all right now because he's so unique and he's so dynamic, and defenses have to almost make an entire game plan around him. And when you're that guy, he's also a great leader as well. Lamar Jackson is a great leader. Everything about Lamar Jackson preaches starting NFL quarterback, franchise quarterback, face of the franchise kind of guy.
100%.
So with all of that said, yes, he has that one big issue of the playoffs. Some of that is bad luck. Some of that is just maybe it's just not the right time. We don't know. Maybe you really can't win with a Lamar Jackson. I think you can. I think if you can have a year where you have Blake Bortles in the AFC Championship game along with an NFC Championship game of Nick Foles and Case Keenum, you could probably win a Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson. Sure. Will a Super Bowl victory happen with this brand of football? That's where we don't know. Because in the AFC, you're competing against teams like the Chargers, the Chiefs, the Raiders, now the Broncos, and now you have the Bills. You have a ton of different teams that can compete in the AFC. So will they win a Super Bowl? I don't know. I think you can win a Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson if everything kind of fell together. It kind of reminds me of Giannis early on in his career. A lot of people question, can Giannis be the best player on a championship team? He ultimately proved that obviously he could be. And a couple things needed to happen in order for that to happen. And I think it's the same thing with Lamar. People are going to question until it happens, can Lamar succeed in the postseason? Because he's unique, because he does things that we haven't seen before. But that's why he's great. And that's why I have him in my top 10 still.
I think I'll take your basketball comparison, but I'll do one better. Just for the record, and I'll dive deeper into it later on at some point before the season starts. But if I've just and I put this list together a couple of days ago, my top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL are from 1 to 15: Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, Pat Mahomes, Tom Brady, Matt Stafford, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, Derek Carr, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, Kirk Cousins, Matt Ryan, Jimmy Garoppolo. Yes, I have Derek Carr in my top 10 and not Lamar Jackson. I'll die on that hill too. Listen, Lamar Jackson's 1-3 in the playoffs. And in the first 4 years of his career, really the only other really good quarterbacks in his conference were Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Deshaun Watson. Now you have those 3 guys, plus Joe Burrow, plus Justin Herbert, plus Russell Wilson. He's got Derek Carr now. He's got some actual weapons, so he can actually compete down there in Las Vegas. You've got Deshaun Watson. I know I said him, but whenever he comes back, if he comes back on a much better team than he was on in Houston, right? You have the potential emergence and ascension of a Mac Jones, maybe even a Trevor Lawrence, maybe even a Zach Wilson as they continue to get older and get better over the course of their careers. You still have Matt Ryan, who he might not be the sexiest quarterback, but he's got a really good team around him. That could be like the AFC is not getting any tougher, and these guys aren't going anywhere. So, do I think it's fair to hold Lamar Jackson's record against him? Absolutely. And here's why. Because there's one other guy in the NFL who's 1-3 in the NFL in the postseason who all we do is hold his playoff record against him. That's Dak Prescott. And I think Dak Prescott's a top 10 quarterback. You heard it on the list. I think he's better than Lamar Jackson. And I'll do you one better. James Harden, when he was in Houston, what did we say? Was one of the most prolific scorers in the history of basketball, was elite. What did he do while he was in Houston? He led the league in scoring a couple times, right? Won himself an MVP, was fantastic. But that style of play never amounted him to anything. Now, as all things in sports, right, a lot of it has to do with bad lucks, bad breaks. Sometimes it's just not your time, right? That can all be the case. But when you look at Lamar Jackson, despite the fact that he is the most unique, I'd say, quarterback in the NFL, and you can make an argument that he's the most unique player in the NFL. I still think that Aaron Donald is the most unique player in the NFL because there's just no stopping Aaron Donald. And he's nothing like we've ever seen before. But if you want to say Lamar's the most unique player in the NFL, I mean, it's right there. If it's not Aaron Donald, it's Lamar Jackson. I say all that to say Lamar Jackson's playoff record, I think, is really, really concerning to me. Because if you look at the games that he's lost the game against Tennessee, who had Ryan Tannehill. That's not a good quarterback. Lost a game to Los Angeles, the Chargers, who had Phillip Rivers, who had played only one season after that and before he retired. And he has a loss. I can't think of who that third loss is against off the top of my head, but I would take every single quarterback that exists in the AFC right now. I'm talking Burrow, Herbert, Wilson, Mahomes, Allen, all of those quarterbacks over both of those two guys. Like, it's not getting any better. These teams are any easier. These teams are getting tougher. They're getting younger. There is a premium. There is not a premium on quarterback talent in the AFC. There is a premium in quarterback talent in the NFC because there are not that many good quarterbacks in the NFC, at least proven right now. But in the AFC, it's filled with good. It's filled with good to great NFL quarterbacks, and on top of that, all of them are young, and on top of that, all of them are MVP caliber. Pat Mahomes has already won one. I think Josh Allen's going to win his first one this season. We can all sit here and talk about the whole Burrow Herbert debate, but both of those guys, I think, will be hoisting an MVP trophy within the next 5 to 7 years, right? Again, you talk about a Mac Jones and a Zach Wilson. Do I think they're MVP caliber right now? No. Could they be as they continue to get better and their situation to get better and they get filled with more talent around them? Absolutely. Like, this is not an easy conference. And so while it's early in his career, while I know everyone likes to bring up the whole Peyton Manning argument, oh, look at Peyton Manning's playoff record before he turned into Peyton Manning. I get all of that. But what I'm saying is Lamar Jackson's road to playoff success is not getting any easier. And if he hasn't been able to go deep into the playoffs and win playoff games before, when it was relatively easier than it is now, it would be crazy for me to think that all of a sudden Lamar Jackson is just going to start rattling off playoff victories when his division's gotten tougher, which means his road into the playoffs itself has gotten tougher, when there's other guys around him that are getting younger and that are younger or in his age bracket and getting better just along with him. I just listed Allen's, Mahomes, Burrow, Herbert, Wilson. That's 5 guys in my top 5. You got Jackson in there as well. Matt Ryan's a couple spots behind him. He's also in the AFC. It's a really tough conference. It is not absurd to think that maybe, just maybe, the proof is in the pudding, right? We had all these James Harden fans, and I was one of them that said, oh, James Harden won a championship like this. But then he didn't. And then now it was always, I don't want to hear anything ever again about James Harden winning a championship this way. I think there is a potential, and I agree with you. I think Lamar Jackson can win a Super Bowl. In Baltimore, I don't know, but I think he can. But I think there is a potential that the next couple of years we could be talking about Lamar the way we have talked about James Harden, in the sense of maybe, just maybe, this style of play doesn't produce championships. And it's possible.
No, it's definitely possible, and I agree with you there, and I can see the James Harden comparison. However, I have one objection to that, and that would be James Harden had no desire to change or get better at anything that he was doing. Lamar Jackson, I feel like Lamar Jackson puts in the work. Lamar Jackson loves football and he wants to be the best that he can be. Lamar Jackson has improved as a passer since he's entered the NFL. Lamar Jackson has, before he got injured last year, I believe he had the most come from behind wins in the NFL last year at the time that he got hurt, which was the big question. Can Lamar Jackson play from behind? Can the Ravens play from behind when they're down by 10, when they're down by 2 possessions? And that is the reason why I feel like he hasn't succeeded in the playoffs yet. It's because at the end of the day, what are his issues? When it comes down to it, yes, he can throw in the red zone. Yes, he can do that. But when the defense knows that the Ravens have to throw the ball, and Lamar Jackson has to push the ball in a 2-minute drill or a time where they need to get the ball down the field as quick as possible, and they need to spread out the receivers. They need to have an empty backfield. Lamar needs to play out of the shotgun and throw outside of the numbers. That's where he just isn't up to the best of the best. Can he do it sometimes?
Sure.
Yeah. We just haven't seen him consistently do it yet. And I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if he got better at it because Lamar Jackson works at those things.
100%.
So that's why I'm also kind of a little bit of a Lamar fan. Like I love the way he plays the game. I think he has so much fun and he does everything the right way. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of root for him, even though I'm a Browns fan a little bit. I am a secret Lamar Jackson fan. But I'll say this: he is from my hometown where I grew up in Boynton Beach, Florida. So maybe a little bit of bias there. But I just feel like Lamar, if he gets better at those things, and it's a big if, right, then he can succeed. And it's not a matter of, it's a matter of can he do it consistently? Because he's shown us in flashes that he can do it at times. But can he do it consistently is the big question.
Yeah, and that is, and that is, ironically enough, the exact reason why Lamar Jackson's outside of my top 10 is because all the guys in my top 10 have proven consistently that they can do that they can, that when the defense knows that they're going to pass, they can make those throws. We talk about two of the greatest quarterback of all time in Tom Brady. Obviously, he's played in more Super Bowls than he's won more Super Bowls than anyone's even played. Of course he can do it. Even a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who's probably he's a top 10 quarterback of all time. You want to put him in the top 5, whatever. He can do it too. We've seen him do it time and time again, right? Even the younger guys, your Pat Mahomes and your Josh Allen, your Joe Burrows and your Justin Herbert. We watched Justin Herbert in the last game of the regular season go 9-4-9 on 3rd and 4th downs in that game against Las Vegas when it really, really mattered and he had to throw the football. He was perfect. There was one guy better, and I can't think of who it is right now because I didn't think to pull up the stat. There was one guy in the history over the course of the season last season. There was one guy better on 3rd and 4th downs than Justin Herbert last season. One guy in the NFL. Like Lamar Jackson hasn't gotten there yet. Do I think he can get there? Of course. Do I think Lamar Jackson could be a more well? Listen, I'll say this: if Lamar Jackson becomes a better passer more consistently, Lamar Jackson is the best quarterback in the NFL. I think because he would be able to, because if we're talking about a situation where Lamar Jackson can make any of the throws that a Josh Allen or a Pat Mahomes can make, on top of the fact that he is already the most lethal scrambler the game has ever seen, of course he's going to be the best quarterback in the NFL. But right now, I think what happens is because of how explosive and how dynamic and how unique Lamar Jackson is, we let that captivate us. Lamar Jackson is obviously a top 10 player as far as what we want to see. We love watching Lamar Jackson play football. Right. But as far as the position of quarterback, I feel like because of his explosiveness and his flashiness, and we call him Action Jackson for a reason, because of all the action, we forget about the other things that go along with being a quarterback. Being able to consistently throw in the ball, being able to put the ball in places that only your receiver can get it, being able to make those big time throws consistently down the stretch. He did it last season in those games against Kansas City and Indianapolis when he's coming back from behind in primetime. That's perfect, but I want to see him do more of it. If he does, I think Lamar Jackson's going to win a championship. I think it's possible Lamar Jackson's going to win a championship with this style of play, but it's not getting any easier. And I think, again, that is why the playoff record is so important, because the AFC has gotten tougher, and it's not going to get any better from this point moving forward.
And to touch up on the playoff success here again, we look at the last 10 Super Bowl winners, the Patriots, the Eagles, the Buccaneers, the Rams, the Broncos, the Seahawks, and even the Ravens in the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. All of those teams have what I described earlier as balance.
Yeah.
When the Ravens won that Super Bowl, Joe Flacco was playing out of his mind, but they also had Ray Rice. When the Patriots won their Super Bowls, they didn't have a dominant back, but they had serviceable backs that were balanced
Andy
with their passing game.
Michelle, LeGarrette Blount. Yeah.
Yep. Same with the Philadelphia Eagles. Balanced running game with a passing game with Nick Foles. The Rams could run the ball if they have to. The Chiefs, Damian Williams almost won Super Bowl MVP in that game.
He did. Yeah.
You need to have a little bit of balance. It's my same diss with the Bills as the Ravens, and the Ravens are the opposite. You need to have a little bit of balance. Yes, you can master the running game, but to win Super Bowls in the NFL, you need to have a little bit of balance, and they just don't have that right now.
Yeah, and can they get there? Sure. You would start by not trading away your best wide receiver. But yeah, I think they can get there. Now, we talk about all this playoff record and all this other stuff. We've already mentioned how stacked the AFC is this season. How many wins will Baltimore have this season? And then I'll double down and add this on. Do the Ravens win the division?
So right now I say the Ravens don't win the division because I think the Bengals will. I think the Bengals improved at their biggest weakness, and they already were amongst the best teams in the conference last year, obviously winning the AFC Championship game and playing in the Super Bowl. So I say the Bengals win the AFC North. The Ravens' record, though, I have them between 11 and 12 wins at 11 and 6 or 12 and 5. I get that we were just kind of dissing them for trading away their best wide receiver and whatnot. But the one thing about the Ravens is this: they will never lose in the regular season to a team that they shouldn't lose to.
Right.
When you have teams that are year in, year out playoff contenders, the one thing that stays true about them, whether it's the Steelers, whether it's the Ravens, these teams that are always in the mix, the Patriots, they don't lose to teams like the Jaguars, like the Colts. All you have to do is beat the Jaguars here in the playoffs. They lose. The Colts aren't perennial playoff contenders year in, year out, and that's the exact reason why, is because they drop games to the Jaguars. The Ravens are going to beat the teams who they're supposed to beat. They probably won't beat some of the elite teams, which will be like their kind of black eye going into the playoffs. Yeah. But they're going to handle business against teams that they're better than, and then they'll win most of the 50-50 games. That's why I have them at 11 and 6 or 12 and 5, is because the Ravens always tend to handle their business well.
Well, I've said this once and I'll say it again. I didn't say it on my show, so I think I'll down this too. I think the Bengals are going to run away with the division. You have to give respect to the Steelers because the Steelers haven't given us reason to think that they won't win at least 8 games in a season, because they've never not won at least 8 games in a season. Unfortunately, though, I do think that they'll win 8 games and they'll be the first losing season of Mike Tomlin. But I also think it's very possible the Steelers creep up towards 9 or 10 games this season, as long as they get everything else outside of the quarterback position handled and airtight, where the quarterback issue won't be so glaring, right? Your Browns, we talked about it already in the last episode. It really just depends on who the quarterback is, and that makes an issue. Then you have the Baltimore Ravens, and we always talk about needs. Going into the draft, the Baltimore Ravens' biggest need was at wide receiver. That was their biggest need. Coming out of the draft, their biggest need is wide receiver, and it's an even bigger need now than it was heading into the draft. When you look at the Bengals, everyone was convinced, and I'm talking about you, Mr. Justin Marvel. Happy 1-year wedding anniversary, by the way. You swore up and down that the Cincinnati Bengals would not invest money into their offensive line. And what did they do? They did just that. They went out and they spent money on the offensive line. This is the only team in the division. Scratch that. Well, yeah. This is the only team in the division that will step onto the field better than they were last season, right? Like, the Steelers, I think, will improve, but the team is pretty much the same, except with the subtraction of Juju Smith-Schuster, which you could say is a slight decline, right? Your Browns, if Deshaun Watson steps onto the field week 1, obviously massive improvement. If not, despite all the additions you made, well, the addition of Amari Cooper, you lost Jarvis Landry, and Jacoby Brissett's going to be the quarterback. That's going to be much of the same for the Browns this season. The Ravens got worse. And I know we like to harp on the fact that the Ravens still won, 8 or 9 games last season with Lamar Jackson being in and out of the lineup and the defense not being that great. That's fantastic. But a lot of it had to do with they still had some type of wide receiver last season. And Tyler Huntley's not a bad backup quarterback. He was really good down the stretch when he really needed to be, right? And as you mentioned, the Ravens don't lose games They're not supposed to lose. In fact, I think you can make an argument that the only game that the Ravens lost last season that they shouldn't have lost, maybe, is that game against Pittsburgh last week of the season that got Pittsburgh into the playoffs. And that was a really close game. It's a divisional game. You kind of like, yeah, well, it's a divisional game. But there's injuries, and so you kind of give them a pass. I say all that to say I think the Ravens will be around. I got to be honest with you. I'm looking at the Ravens at 9 or 10 wins. I really think that the lack of horsepower in the passing game is going to be a detriment because defenses are going to know, yeah, well, they're going to run the ball. Like 85% of the time, they're going to run the ball. This isn't going to be a situation like Buffalo where, yes, while you are correct that they don't run the ball as much, there's still something there, and the passing game is really, really, really good, and you can rely on it, right? This is going to be a thing like Kansas City where they kind of run the ball, and I think CH will take a big step forward this season. Like they kind of run the ball, but they also have a solid passing game, so it kind of works out. This is going to be a thing like Denver where they're balanced. Los Angeles is balanced. I think Las Vegas is even more balanced now. They have a true number one receiver in Devontae Adams, right? You've got the Patriots, I think, will have some sort of balance. Now they've got Devontae Parker. He's not the sexiest guy on the table, but he's better than what they have right now in the wide receiver room right now, and I think like that'll bring some balance. I think at the quarterback position specifically because of them bringing in Matt Ryan, the Colts are going to have some balance now. I already thought that the wide receiver room was the most underrated in football, but they had Carson Wentz throwing them the ball. That wasn't the best thing in the world. So the Ravens, I think, are going to be in the hunt down the stretch because I would be crazy not to think that because they're always in the hunt down the stretch. I can't remember the last time I didn't see the Ravens on one of those playoff graphics on CBS telling me who was in the hunt. So they'll be in the hunt. The question then becomes, do they have enough to get in? And that's where I'm kind of hesitant because we've got an entire division in the West where all four of those teams could and probably will make their way into the playoffs. You have the Bills, you have the Colts, I would assume, and you've got the Bengals. There's one spot left that you're going to have to beat out the Miami Dolphins. You're going to have to beat out the New England Patriots. You're going to have to beat out the Tennessee Titans. Maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers because the Steelers are the Steelers and you can never count them out. That's a 5-team race for one spot. And I don't know if the Ravens have enough. I'm inclined to say yes because there's not a reason why I would think that when fully healthy they can't make the playoffs. So I'm inclined to say that they will make the playoffs. But the race is a lot tighter because even those 5 teams that are in there, the Dolphins and the Patriots and the Steelers and the Colts and the Titans, all of those teams have some form of balance. I would say in that group, the Ravens are obviously the best, but it's not as glaringly obvious as it once was just last season or even a couple years before. So I'll say 9 or 10 wins. The step back at wide receiver is massive to me. I think it's going to be really, really, really big.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't shock me if they won 9 or 10 or even less. But I just have a lot of faith in the Ravens because I've seen them.
Yeah.
I've seen them. And I'm also assuming that they're going to be playing the Browns twice a year without Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
So that's 2 wins right there. I think Pittsburgh's tough to beat, but I think they should at least split with Pittsburgh.
They should. But this is the thing. I think that Pittsburgh's defense, I think, will be better than it was last season.
Mm-hmm.
In Pittsburgh, when you've got Mike Tomlin and you have Brian Flores on your calling the shots defensively, they're going to know that there's going to be run heavy. The Pittsburgh Steelers have no problem playing sloppy football. The Steelers got their name as being one of the more storied cornerstone franchises in the NFL off of being a sloppy football team that runs it. We're talking about, the Bust Jerome Bettis and guys like that, and also playing stifling defense. Those, if we just run down the schedule, you've got the Jets, the Dolphins. First of all, they start the season off with the AFC East, which I think could be a lot more problematic than it seems because it's all AFC East teams back to back to back in their alternating. They're going to New York, then down to Miami, then back up east to New England, and they're coming home for Buffalo. Then they host Cincinnati. They go back to New York for the Giants. They play your Browns at home. Then they've got Tampa Bay and New Orleans bye week. Panthers, Jags, Denver, Pittsburgh, Browns, Falcons, Pittsburgh, Bengals. When you look at it, it's okay, they should win at least 11 games, but there's a lot of trap games in there. That Atlanta game on Christmas Eve, I think could be a trap game because it's sandwiched in between 2 division games. I think that the Giants game could maybe be a trap game because it's sandwiched in between two division games. I think that at some point in there, they'll beat the Jets, but Miami or New England's going to get them, I think. It's like they shouldn't, but it's not impossible to think that they can. And that's where I'm kind of nervous at where I could easily see them going 12 wins. And I think high end they do get 12. And that'd be a really good season. You win 12 games running the ball 85% of the time. But if I'm just being realistic, we're talking 9 or 10 wins. I think the only guaranteed wins on the schedule, even though I did say they were trap games, are the 2 games against the New York football teams, the game against Jacksonville, the game against Atlanta, and the game against Carolina. That's 5 guaranteed wins, I think. And I would say the 2 games against Cleveland, because they will be without Deshaun Watson. So there's 7 wins there. The other 2 wins, Miami and New England. If we're talking about just beating all the teams you're supposed to beat and kind of just maybe stealing a couple along the way. So this will be the toughest season of the Lamar Jackson era for Baltimore, for sure. And I would expect them to address the wide receiver situation either in the offseason next season or during the draft. Now, if they go out and they get an Odell Beckham Jr. or Julio Jones, then that kind of changes because now you've got, or both somehow. Now you have receivers you can throw the ball to. But right now, if Rashad Bateman's your number 1 guy and Mark Andrews is your number 2, well, Mark Andrews is your number 1, Rashad Bateman's your number 2, no shot at those guys because they're very talented. That's not enough. I don't think that's enough in this AFC.
You know who they should call, who's still a free agent, and I think this would be perfect? Will Fuller. Call Will Fuller. That is a guy who, when healthy, he's a speed guy. Can take the top off of defense. Mm-hmm. He can make plays in open space. Obviously, the question mark is his can he stay on the field in terms of his injuries and whatnot. But the good news is he's not going to be getting the usage as he would elsewhere in a run-heavy offense. So that could kind of preserve his health over a season. That is, I just looked at the NFL free agents list right now. That's who, if I was the Ravens, I would call him and try to bring him on board.
That's not a bad phone call. I think that's a phone call you should make. That's not a bad phone call at all. Listen, it's always a pleasure to have Payton on the show, and you'll see him again later today because we're going live to talk about the NBA free agency. But again, if you have not already and you are comfortable with it, please check out the Browns episode. Again, if it's triggering for you talking about Deshaun Watson, the rest of the conversation starts at the 36 minute and 40 second mark of the show. We kind of talk about everything else. This is episode 14 of the series. We've got, if I'm just doing the math, we got 18 more to go. We've got Dolphins, Colts, and Chargers next week, excuse me. So those will be 3 fun episodes with JT and the Don, a new collab for the Colts, which I won't spoil. And we got NFL Mike to come on and talk about his Chargers. So a lot of good stuff going forward. So please make sure you like, subscribe, click the notification bell so you don't miss any new episodes, all that good stuff. Payton, please tell everybody where they can find you and what's up next for you.
So you can find me at PD Sports on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. That is normally where I'm most active. You can find me at Payton Doyle Show on Twitter and Facebook. Currently on my YouTube, I host a live show every week. I'm also doing something similar to this where I'm breaking down each team and my predictions for them coming up next season. However, I'm not like Marcus, so I don't have a bunch of cool friends to bring on. So it'll just be me. And so that's pretty much it. I post a lot on TikTok as well. That's where I kind of post the majority of my stuff. So yeah, go check me out at PD Sports. But if you're unsubscribed to Marcus, you're tweaking, bro. You need to subscribe to him ASAP Rocky, and that's the bottom line.
Yeah, what Payton said. Subscribe. There's about 70% of you guys that watch the show and don't subscribe, and that's just blatantly unacceptable if I do say so myself. Like I said, again, Friday night live on here, on YouTube, on Twitter, on TikTok. We kind of recap NBA free agency. Maybe there will be some movement with Katie and Kyrie by then that we can talk about. Odds are they won't be. I've got a hot take that I won't share until tomorrow because I want Payton's raw reaction. I'm going to wait, and it's going to blow the roof off of everything. He's probably going to want to leave the show. That's fine. I've already prepped myself for that, and I've already got a contingency plan in place. So, yeah, I appreciate all you guys, as I said earlier. And thank you guys for watching. And as always, you guys are the rest of your lives.